And we are now recording. Fantastic. A little bit of housekeeping to begin with. We have a number of questions, obviously, for Mark and Shabani, who are our panelists today, and we'll introduce the two of them very shortly. But we'll also make space for a good 15 and 20 minutes of Q&A time at the end of our discussion. So we have a Q&A function on the call today. There should be a button that you can see at the bottom. And please feel free to feed through any questions you have throughout the presentation, and we'll pick some of those at the end. We love having engagement on these webinars, and we've actually got a bit of a special prize going today for the person whose question receives the highest amount of upvotes. So if you see a question in there that you like, upvote it, and you may end up helping someone who asked the question to win a free Design Outlook conference ticket, which is Australia's leading design conference and taking place down in Melbourne 1 week from today on June 20th. So that's a big, exciting event. It's really a weekly festival with a lot of other components to the week as well. But yeah, if you want a ticket, ask a great question, and hopefully the upvotes will be in your favor. But yeah, other housekeeping. Today's webinar is for 1 hour, so we'll be trying to wrap up at the latest by 1:30. At the conclusion of the session, we'll make sure anyone who's joined today will get a copy of the recording. So keep your eyes peeled out for that. Share it amongst your teams as well, or anyone interested in this conversation. And we'll probably kick off with a bit of an icebreaker soon. But to set the scene for today's session, we, I guess here at Askable, we've been flying under the radar a little bit when it comes to AI and its impact on building products and UX specifically. But now that the hype cycle around AI has kind of settled, it's very evident that AI is here to stay, with more and more companies trying to implement and adopt AI as part of their product offering and as part of their internal processes. In the past, this kind of happened mostly under the hood or in the back end, but now we're seeing a lot of AI tooling becoming more and more customer facing and accessible at the fingertips of consumers. So today we just wanted to initiate a conversation really to understand how AI already is and is going to continue to affect user experiences and UX as a function in organizations. We understand it's quite a broad topic and it can get quite philosophical. But for the purpose of today's webinar, we're going to kind of stick within the scope of a UX and product design space and research lens as well. And we'll probably have some more conversations or webinars along the way with industry experts, and we'll dig into more specific things. But that being said, I'll love to introduce formally our two panelists. So Shabani, we have on the call today, who most recently has been a design director at Ozpost. And then we've got Mark as well, who is a client engagement principal and AI practice lead at DS. So guys, I'll get you to say hello and to introduce a little bit more about yourselves, but to also indicate one or two AI tools that you use at the moment or that you are fascinated in within the UX context. And as they answer, we'd love any listeners on the call to jump into the chat at the moment and throw in any AI tools that you've been using within a UX space or not. We'd love to know what kind of is being used across the traps and why you love using those tools. So jump into the chat and bombs away. And Shabani, we might throw to you for the first introduction.
Sure. Thanks for the intro, and hi everyone. I'm Shabani, and I'm the current design director at Australia Post. And apart from that, I'm also the CEO of Dot Infinity, which is very close to my heart. It's a product and strategy advisory for helping organizations with their identify the right opportunities for AI as well as machine learning adoption, and also to point them to the right providers, the solution providers who can help them with that adoption. So by craft, I've always been a product designer as well as a researcher. So very humans, and now the new augmentation of humans in terms of AI is very, very close to my heart. So looking forward to this conversation.
Fantastic. And Mark?
Thanks there, Nate. So my name's Mark Foe, as Nate introduced before. My role is the client engagement principal and AI practice lead at DS. And what that means is I'm responsible for biz dev, sales, building our internal AI practice and overseeing a lot of the AI products that we build. For those who don't know DS, the organisation I work for, we're an Australian technology consulting company that specializes in bringing digital data and devices being IoT, to build intelligent products essentially, right? So we've got a very small but talented design team at the heart of all of this to really help us remain connected to the user when we're building these products. In my role, I get a chance to speak to a lot of customers about how they're currently using AI or would like to explore the use of AI. And we cover a really broad spectrum of AI technologies and tools, everything from common things that you may have heard of, such as forecasting, churn prediction, product recommendation to fraud detection. They're the very common ones, to more unique applications that we work on that are super interesting as well, like helping medical delivery drones who deliver medical supplies in remote kind of parts of the world essentially land safely by using computer vision to detect humans, analysing imagery and satellite imagery, I should say, to help farmers with crop dusting so they're not contaminating waterways. So some really novel and interesting uses of AI. I mentioned IoT before, and working with wearable companies with watches that are monitoring sleep and heart rate for anxiety prediction, or even headbands in ICU for oxygen flow. So very, very unique applications of this. And they're all general traditional AI. And, we all have heard of, the more generative applications now, generative AI as well. So that's emerging, and we're building a lot of products around there as well. To answer your question, sorry, Nate, about tools, I use ChatGPT. I use, Poe gives me access to a lot of text and image-based ones. But what fascinates me a little bit more about this space is those nice little features that you get that are backed by AI. The photo app on my phone is one that I use all the time. That sticker feature that allows you to just, long press and crop that little image out so you can create a montage. I use it for a montage for my son's kindergarten project, for example, to simple things like, text extraction from a photo. So those are the type of tools that kind of fascinate me, and how people are injecting AI into interesting features.
Sorry, I forgot to answer that part of the question. Thanks for the reminder, Mark. Yeah, so obviously the most obvious tools are, of course, ChatGPT, Copilot, which we use every day. But I, on a personal level, have also started to use a lot of image building tools as well as video making tools. So, like Runway AI, as well as DALL-E, Midjourney, and one of my favorites is Adobe Firefly, just because of the kind of customizations that I can do with that. But I think looking at tools from a UX practitioner level, they can be, useful in all parts of the journey, whether you're at a discovery phase, where there are AI-enabled research tools who can help you, find out what is the right call data, the con data, as well as what are some of the behavioral data, which now a lot of tools are bringing into their mix. Then if you look at the idea unpacking stage, that's where, again, I actually build my own custom GPTs nowadays to, stress test some ideas. Of course, there's always a bit of bias involved. So as a UX practitioner, you have to be very aware that AI has its own bias when you're doing a brainstorming with a ChatGPT. And then, of course, from a creation side, as I mentioned earlier, there are quite a lot of creation tools which are right now out in the market, so you can literally take your pick and choose.
Fantastic. And thank you for those who've jumped into the chat and highlighted some of the tools that you use in your space. And again, a reminder to use the Q&A to send through some questions. So shout out to Kevin and Jani for sending through their questions already. But Mark and Shibani, I want to begin to unpack a little bit more, I guess, AI's current role within UX. So, as we see AI becoming increasingly relevant and important in the world of UXs, whether that be in the design, product, or researcher roles, I guess there are three areas of impact that we would like to unpack in this space on UX. So the first one being how AI tools actually help with the UX process. And Shibani, I'll probably throw it to you from a practitioner's perspective. How is your processes within UX kind of shaped and evolved through the use of AI and tooling? And then also, and this will probably be more for Mark, in terms of how AI technology enables or powers new user and customer experiences. and why UX practices and methodology remain important for those AI-powered products or features. So that's kind of what I want to go to first in terms of unpacking in a bit more depth. And Shibani, I'll throw to you first to help us understand some of the ways in which AI has shaped your UX processes. If you could elaborate for us a bit further.
Look, to be very honest, it's something very new for us. So we are still trialing and experimenting as to what works and what doesn't work. It's definitely speeded things up a lot. It definitely helps augment any process. But at the end of the day, we can't forget that the core of our job is about humans and understanding, what the humans are telling us, how they want to interact with the product, and then eventually what's the outcome that they want. So I think with AI, it's definitely helped us understand a lot of the data which would have taken a lot of weeks or days or even months for us to crunch and get some patterns out of. AI definitely helps in that, especially with my within the work that Dot Infinity is right now doing. We use those kind of Gen AI insights tools a lot of times. Then again, as I had mentioned earlier, in terms of brainstorming, sometimes, and this is, again, we put the lens on that there is bias. So we allow the AI to brainstorm, and then it essentially tells us, okay, this is everything that's in the box. So then what can be there outside the box? So it's a great tool to actually know what are the most obvious solutions to a problem that we are looking at. And then it helps us, stretch our thinking a bit further and say, okay, now that AI has done all this thinking for us, what is it that it's not looking at? Let's look at that. So it's a bit of a twisted way of looking at it, but it really helps. It's a great way to brainstorm. I must say that. Then, of course, speeding up the delivery process. And when I say AI, not just a generative AI, obviously there are huge number of generative AI tools, but also in general, when you look at the actual delivery process and a lot of delivery tools, they have actually built in the AI capability now. So it's much faster to churn out whether it's wireframes or prototypes or anything like that. So it's across the process.
Yeah, awesome. I guess to chip in here quickly as well, from an askable point of view, within kind of the research phase of the UX process, we've captured a lot of feedback from our clients on the different challenges within the discovery space in terms of discovery and generative insights. And to your point, Shibani, in terms of the speed of delivery, and from a research point of view, we've started to explore some AI tooling there in terms of AI moderation and synthesis of research data to help speed up some of those processes too. And that's kind of where we've seen a real win. But Mark, to throw to you, in your experiences, and feel free to include some of your real life case studies here as well, where have you seen AI tech really power the user experience?
Yeah, okay. So I mentioned earlier about some of the things that I like to use on a personal kind of front. A lot of our customers are injecting AI into their products at the moment. I'll cover a couple more traditional AI methods and then a couple of generative ones. The first one, and I'm including these because there's a big design element to this. The first one's an insurance company that's based in Singapore. They provide smartphone insurance to Asia and the European markets. The second-hand smartphone market is a big one, and people take out screen protection insurance in those markets, something that we're not very familiar with over here, but over there it's a big kind of market for that service. And typically what people will need to do is take their phones to a workshop or a store, have it inspected before the insurance is given or authorized. And what this organization wanted to do was just automate that process and make it online and seamless as possible. So what we had to design for was essentially guiding the user through the purchase process of taking a photo of their phone and then having a model determine whether it's damaged or not before you gave that policy. And that's a big design challenge because one, we wanted the photo to come from the phone itself, so it wasn't a photo taken of another phone. And what our designers came up with is an approach where you point at the phone at a mirror, and use the selfie function to take it. But of course, it doesn't look anything like this because I see my face here. But we had to guide the user through that process of taking that photo. And the important thing about getting the right photo is that back-end model relies on a well kind of taken photo that's, focused. There isn't any kind of light or other things that might confuse the model. And what we started with initially was just some visual instructions on how to do it. We observed it and noticed that people weren't following it. And then we had to build some guidance into it. So what we did was we as the customer, the prospective customer, was holding that phone, we gave some visual cues. So we had a machine learning model, and you can't see it that well here in terms of my phone, but put a green bounding box around the phone whenever it was well focused, and red when it wasn't. And then also some instructions if they needed to move it back and forward. So those visual cues are really important. That was interacting with a model that was detecting whether there was a good photo or was a stabilized photo or not. And then what we also did was provided a countdown, 3, 2, 1 before the photo was taken, because what we found is once they were in focus and they pressed the button or something, that would cause some blur. So those design cues were really important. We learnt that through testing and observing how people were using it. But ultimately we got to the point where it was taking some really fantastic photos in the end that the model in the background could detect and assess, whether it was damaged before. So that would, and you could do that in a matter of minutes now. They can take up policies really quickly. They can do claims really quickly as well. So it was a seamless experience involving the user, but a massive design challenge to get that right. In a similar vein, we're working with a nutrition and a weight loss company, again with a mobile app. A key part of the journey and the application that's really challenging is the food diaries. Members entering what food they've eaten, and typically what they do is they scan a barcode and you get the nutrition information. But there's new foods added all the time, and what happens is they'll scan the barcode and they can't find it. And what the user had to do was take a photo of that new product and email it in, and the nutritionist will get to it, maybe in a month's time, right? And the important thing and challenge around that is the member needs to know what they've eaten and the nutritional value, so they make a decision on what they should eat next. So we designed, again, an image capture kind of solution that allowed them to take a photo of the nutrition table and the ingredients. OCR would lift that information out, and then based on that information, we use natural language to determine the food category and then the food unit, so they can get that information right away and get along with their day, essentially, right? So it's some conveniences there that kind of addressed some massive pain points that the users were kind of facing. That feature was initially launched in September last year for the first version of it, and about 14,000 new products were added since then. So you can imagine that old process of emailing, that would have taken, I don't know, God knows how long before that kind of occurred. So AI was again injected into that process. So those are two more traditional approaches. I'll just touch really quickly on generative AI and how we're using that in a couple of health and fintech related situations. Where we're seeing the application of that in the real world is question answering and chatbots and information search. So it could be a chatbot for FAQs. It could be in the health environment context of navigating really complex documentation, eligibility rules, standard operating procedures. And the design challenge around that particular one is we're helping kind of practitioners and clinicians navigate complex information through a chat interface. But they've also got a big PDF they've got to navigate. And, so we designed something that was kind of side by side, a chat interface and a navigator that helped them navigate through the PDF. And the response that the generative AI would come back with is also a citation, a link to the PDF. So that builds a bit of trust as well. So it came back with the answer, but by the way, click through and navigate through, right? And ask additional questions. So that was a huge design consideration. We borrowed from some cues around the legal tech and what we've seen in legal tech as well. So yeah, there are a couple of examples. Text summarization is the other one that we're seeing a lot of in the science. We've built something in the healthcare space again around scientific research, and summarizing research papers is a challenging thing when you're using scientific language. And what we did was give the user the option to select the type of output, whether it's a LinkedIn post or a presentation, and also the summary, using the Flesh readability score of should it be readable for an 8th grader as well. So those are some of the design considerations that we had to kind of bake into the product to make it, usable for the end customer.
That's a great point you've made, Mark. And I think one thing as UX practitioners we have to keep in mind is AI helps with hyper-personalization of experiences. We can get hyper-local, we can get hyper-personalized, hyper-customized, and whatever we offer. But what that personalization, customization, and localization looks like, I think that's where UX practitioners really play an important role in providing that. And I think there are some experiments which we are doing right now to actually provide that, and essentially enabling or using AI to extremely augment the experience for the end user.
Fantastic. So it's pretty clear that, the role AI can play or impact is quite diverse and expansive, which leads me to our next kind of item for discussion, which is, I guess, the impact that AI is having on organizations as a whole in, I guess, their efforts to adopt these new technologies. So yeah, I'm keen to understand, Shibani, maybe we'll throw to you first. In your world, can you provide some insight or some pitfalls that you've seen in terms of how AI has been adopted, maybe without enough consideration or thought behind it?
Look, I think when it comes to pitfalls, one of the main pitfalls right now, which most organizations are facing, is there's so much of noise around AI. Literally every second startup in the world is doing something with AI. So I think one of the main questions which organizations are facing right now is, what is the right solution for me? And, how can I prove the return of investment around this? So, and then they end up adopting some of those reactive tools, which might be just a version of, just a very quick hack of a custom GPT, and without having a clear understanding of what the return of investment will be, which eventually leads to a high amount of cost, time, and effort spent on providing a solution which does not resonate with the users, which does not resonate with business outcomes, and you end up with a massive solution which does not do anything. So I think that is the biggest pitfall. And a lot of times also, though, because the solutions are half-baked, they are leading to hallucinations or data being incorrect, which again is leading to incorrect outcomes. So there can be many pitfalls, but I think as long as we keep bringing the human back into the equation and making sure that we are doing our due diligence on that regard, those pitfalls can definitely be avoided, or what do you call it? Navigated around.
Yeah, fantastic. And Mark, I'm happy for you to add to that answer yourself, but my question for you is, how do organizations go about identifying the right problems to solve with AI, or I guess the right opportunities to execute on, and what insights do you have into that space?
I think it's partly just educating yourself and knowing what AI is actually good at, especially with this generative AI world, I should say. It does a lot of things, but perhaps focus on the things it's good at, and look at kind of what does that look like in your organization. And that's solved for before. I think when you're exploring things like AI, the DVF framework is really important. Desirability, viability, and feasibility is really important in selecting which problems to solve. And obviously UX represents the desirability lens there, and it's such an important one early on, from the customer journey mapping and understanding where those pain points and opportunities, so we know we're solving a real problem, right? Some of those ideas that I spoke about earlier came out of exploring the journey through the different touch points, and where users or customers are failing or being blocked for whatever reason. And then once you've selected the problem to solve, it's really designing ultimately the experience around that. And I talked a lot before about especially when these days users are part of creating the input that's fed into a model. I talked about taking photos before, even prompting is a form of input, right? So how do you design for that? So ultimately, from a UX perspective, it's contributing to prioritizing the pain points, opportunities to address, and then designing the experience so it's actually used, by your customers is an important kind of consideration when you're delivering the solution. And obviously user testing and trialing out different approaches is an important kind of approach to all of this as well. And, it's not a once-off, build it and it'll work. It's constant feedback, and, need to iterate over that and discover and kind of, adapt to change, essentially.
And I think if we have to break down any successful implementation of AI, there have been, I would say there have been three key factors which have, governed that. The first one is obviously data and, the quality of data. So as UX practitioners, how can we ensure that we are capturing the right data, or we are telling the AI, this is the right data to capture, and this is free of biases. The second one is, what is the ecosystem of AI that we are building? So what are the, given the kind of problems that we have to solve, are we solving it holistically? And how is AI really helping us solve it in a holistic manner? So for example, somebody has to buy a dress, as simple as that, right? So you go to a shop, and you purchase a dress. But then apart from that, yes, the AI will probably give you great recommendations. It will tell you, what will look good with this and what will not go with that and all of that. But then what's the ecosystem beyond? What happens after somebody buys the dress? There are aspirational values attached to it, which is where AI can again throw some light into it. So how are we catering to the user's aspirations around, say, weight loss? Or it can be about looking good or attending an event. So how do you really build that complete ecosystem, which caters to every, not just the immediate needs, but the desired needs and the wants of the user? And most of the organizations which have actually implemented AI successfully have cracked that code. The third one would be, and I think that's the most important one, is your AI can be only as good as the human asking the right questions behind it. So are you asking the right questions from your AI? Are you getting the right answers that you need from the AI? And are you making it do the right tasks that it needs to do? So at the end of the day, it is there to do something for you. So are you making it do the right thing versus, are you just giving into the noise and the hype around it and just building solutions in a very reactive manner?
Yeah, 100%. I love that you mentioned there, Shibani, like the role or the relationship that exists between a human and AI. And just quickly on this topic of exploring or executing on the right problems and the right opportunities, I think this is where like continuous discovery becomes crucial as well. From an askable perspective, that's where we've really looked at how can AI power continuous discovery so that organizations can quickly and regularly know what the right opportunities are to execute on and to build products on. So yeah, fantastic. And I think, another barrier that we've seen, or like a talking point in this space, is just around ethics and privacy, in ensuring that, AI tools are used correctly and the impacts of the tooling are kind of kosher, as they become increasingly multimodal, and often they can be perceived as black boxes. So yeah, Mark, I might throw this one to you, but what are the main challenges that designers face in ensuring transparency and user trust in the use of AI tech?
Yeah, okay. I might start by addressing the black box terminology you used before. And I think for me, it's shades of grey, depending on what model you're choosing. Some models are less explainable than others. If you're using a deep neural network, they work really well, but the explainability is difficult there. As opposed to using another technique that you can explain. So it's horses for courses. We've done some work with clients in the fintech space around fraud detection, and they needed to explain why this particular individual was investigated. So we picked a model to address that. So that black box nature is really a model selection at times question. Now, in terms of transparency, there's a bit of that, obviously in the black box nature of explainability, but I think being upfront with your users that they are engaging with an AI is really important, and being very transparent about that. In all the AI kind of features and bots and whatnot that we built, including that feature where you're adding foods, we let the user know that, this is powered by machine learning behind it. Sometimes we're letting them know that it's designed to answer, in a bot situation, answer these type of questions. Sometimes we let them know that it's a new bot, it's still learning. So it's just managing expectations, but first and foremost, let them know that they're engaging with an AI, if they are. So being transparent about that. And trust is, I mean, a broad thing, right? Trust, if you're being transparent about it, ultimately you build trust if it works. And actually, Shibani mentioned product recommendations. If it's recommended the right dress for this person, then they'll continue using it. And you're going to build that over time. And, there's a bit of concern at the moment around generative AI and hallucinations, as Shibani mentioned early on. But there are techniques to kind of address that beyond UX. You can build in some guardrails in there for both the inputs and outputs. You can also do things like, if you want to constrain it to answering the type of things and using your corporate or corpus of information, you can do that as well through techniques that where you can fine tune LLMs to only answer the things that, by passing the LLM the information you want as well. And also, there is also option to build human in the loop here, where the users are human to correct things. And the add food ones I didn't mention, once the OCRs lifted up the text, we give the user the opportunity to correct it before they submit it as well. So that's one option where you can build in the human loop there. And there's other ways of using that as well, injecting that human element to it as well.
Yeah, but I would agree with Mark. I think you've summed it up really well. So there's nothing more to be said other than the fact that when we are being upfront, we firstly tell the user that, this is AI, as Mark has already mentioned. And also, be very clear that are you using the information that you're gathering? How are you using that? Obviously, we are going to anonymize information and everything, but then without going into the dark pattern domain, how are we making sure that we are not penalizing the user for the information that they've given? A very simple example would be when there was this organization in Canada, which is essentially a healthcare provider, and they built their healthcare application. And the healthcare system, which allowed for patient data to be recorded with doctors, and then doctors to be able to, guide their patients better in terms of their, health journey, not just their admission into a healthcare system, but actually their overall healthcare journey. Now, this particular provider tied up with a grocery chain, one of the biggest grocery chains in the same country, and also a loyalty provider within the same country. So these three entities together, essentially, their idea was that, yes, we'll gather data. We'll first be upfront with the user that we are gathering data. We will anonymize it, but also we are gathering the data not to penalize the user, but to encourage the user to have a more healthy lifestyle. So the idea was that the healthier groceries you buy, the better, loyalty points you get, and your loyalty status keeps getting better, which eventually also maps back to your healthcare insurance, which gets lower. So they could have penalized the user by, just increasing the insurance, which they chose not to do. But rather, it was a very conscious human and design-led decision to actually reward the user and reward the behaviors instead of, going on the dark side of things and penalizing them.
Awesome. Thank you for both unpacking that question. And I think at different stages throughout today, you've both hinted towards the value, or even the irreplaceable value of human insight and human contribution in the adoption of AI. So Shibani, I have a question for you in terms of the skills that you think UX designers or people working within UX need to start improving on or gaining to be able to, I guess, compete in this new landscape of AI adoption. What would you say to that?
That's a great question. And I think that's a question on everybody's mind right now, because we all are at that point of time where we feel that our jobs are threatened because cost of knowledge and the speed of producing knowledge-driven work and speed of creativity and cost of creativity is getting almost to zero. It's getting cheaper and cheaper to create objects or create artifacts. So where do the designers stand? And I think that's where we need to go back to our core strength, which is unpacking a problem. Now, if you look at it from an organizational perspective, for an organization, the three basic ways that they can implement AI is firstly to create something new. Second is to transform their operations. And the third is essentially to influence behavioral change, right? So in all of these three spaces, if you look at it, UX has still a very strategic role to play. Sorry. So when you look at creating something new, what is that new thing that needs to be created? What do customers want? What do users want? UX still has those answers. An AI or a Gen AI platform can't give you those answers. It'll give you something which is very obvious. But what's the most unobvious? That's where the human again comes back into the picture. Then transforming processes. You can only transform processes if you know what the problems in the process are. And you can't rely on just whether it's Gen AI led tools. You can definitely rely on data which is generated by the Gen AI tools or even hardcore AI tools. But what to do with that data? How do you really convert it into a strategy to transform your operation? That's again something which UX can help with. And the third one in influencing behavior. I mean, this again goes back to the ethics and responsibility of it. You want to influence the user's behavior, but you want to influence it in a way that is positive, which will benefit humanity, which will eventually make us a sustainable civilization. Again, a lot of the responsibility on the UX designer's shoulders, but this is where we can actually, instead of feeling threatened, I feel we should feel like superheroes. We've been given some new tools. It's time to, really push that.
Fantastic. Mark, did you have anything to add to that? Otherwise, we might flow through to a question and answer time.
Yeah, okay, we can do that.
Yeah, fantastic. And thank you to everyone who has been using the Q&A function. We've got 12 questions in there. So we might just get through a few of those to begin with, and we'll start with the ones that have got the most amount of upvotes. So we've got a couple in there with 4 upvotes on them. So we'll start off with Sandra's question, which is synthetic sample the next big thing? And for those who are unsure what synthetic sample is, it's basically the ability to use generative AI to generate human-style responses to questions based on existing data sets. So back to the question, which use cases do you expect synthetic sample to replace human sample? And where might that be seen as a bit of a no-go of executing in that way? So I'll put that to both of you. If you need some time, we can go to another question, but any immediate responses to that?
Look, this is a very interesting concept, and I believe synthetic sampling has been used very successfully whenever they had to generate large data sets and really understand what can be certain, possible behaviors around it. I can't confidently say where it should or should not be used. I think definitely we should use it to generate test data. It's extremely gold when you don't have the kind of, access to end users or anything. But at the end of the day, you have to validate it with real people and real essentially players in the field. You can't just, rely on synthetic data because it will be only as good as a certain extent. But I'm sure probably, Mark, have you used something like that when you guys have been?
Yeah, but probably not in the same context. What we have been using generative AI for on occasion is using it to generate synthetic data to train traditional models. Mm-hmm. So in spam detection, for example, we've been able to do that quite successfully to create more sample data to train a model, essentially. So it's been quite effective. I know we wouldn't use it in every occasion, but it's a good way to train a traditional model if you don't have enough data or representative data in your data set to train accurate models. So we have used in the synthetic data context, but probably not in the same way that the original person's asking the question is. But yeah.
And I think there are some areas where you can actually build those synthetic use cases to really push the boundaries of your model or push the boundaries of your option. So I think that's where it's super useful. But yeah, when it comes to actual, when you really want to understand what the users are experiencing, what you want to understand what their behavior would be, I think synthetic models are not the best place to go for that.
Well responded. Awesome. Another question from Susan, and this one has 6 upvotes. Her question is, do you, the two of you, see any risks for government departments when using public-facing AI tools? And then on the flip side of that, Yanni has jumped in. Are there any risks to the public when government departments use AI tools? So either the risk for the government or for the public, do you see any red flags in that space?
There would always be, and I think there are lots and lots of risks. You can never stop counting them. So I think it's about having the right frameworks in place to make sure that we are doing those checks, and that's why it is becoming more and more the responsibility of governments to have those guidelines in place, those ethics frameworks in place, so that data is not used and abused. And same on the users end also. I think we are right now at that time in history, and this is an example which I use very often, so forgive me for people who have already heard this example, but we're at this point where it's very similar to when industrial revolution started, right? There was huge amount of change coming. It would have changed jobs. It would have, it would have finished a lot of jobs. It would have changed the way people interact and carry out their daily activities. And this is exactly what's happening now as well. So do you completely close yourself off and sit in a corner of a room worried about the risks, or you put the right frameworks in place to combat those risks? So we are the kind of world that we are today because industrial revolution happened, and there were organizations and people who experienced problems, who were quick to identify a lot of risks, and then eventually lobby for policies to be put in place so that we are now living in a much better world. And it's a continuous process. So I think there will always be risks. It's about trying to get an early identification of risks and then trying to get the right kind of lobbying to get the frameworks in place. And it's responsibility not just of the government, it's also the responsibility of end users. As customers, we are the first ones who should raise our voice and say if something is not right.
Awesome. Mark, anything you wanted to add to that?
No, other than to say it really depends, digging into the intent of the question. Is it the government's use of public-facing AI? Working with government departments, then the governance structures are quite, rigid, right? So if they are going to, employ any AI in their services, then they're going to go through some pretty stringent processes. So pretty confident that those, the right checks are made. So yeah, nothing really more to add to that other than, if this is around, if you're using it for surveillance, if you're using it for those type of intents, then yeah, there are risks to the public. But ultimately, we've seen government departments, inject AI in the right places with the right intent to essentially build and improve the service to the citizens, really.
Nice. This one's a bit more of a encouragement for the audience potentially, but how do you get designers or UX researchers or product managers, how do you get them fired up about generative AI?
I'm fired up already. I think it's you can't get people fired up about a tool. You can get people fired up about outcomes of the tool. So I think if you want to excite somebody, if you want to excite your team, tell them what all are the possibilities. And as UX designers, I think it's our responsibility, for the sake of the longevity of our professions, to be very, very aware of what's out there. What are the capabilities that AI can offer, not just generative AI, but actually AI as well as machine learning can offer, and then try to push the envelope accordingly.
Yeah, I think, as you said, Shabani, I think it's here to stay. The adoption rate is really, really high, and I've been in this space for a good 5 years now. And the noise over the last, or noise, I should say, the conversation over the last, 12 to 18 months has been enormous. Designers, I see it as an opportunity. Really, people are using ChatGPT, co-pilots now. How can I, use that as inspiration to design and build something for my customer? We talked about, the chatbot's just one, right? But that summarization tool, there's things that generative AI is really good at. So how can I use that capability and build it for my customers, whether it's internal or external? And I think that's a massive opportunity. And to what Shabani said before, it's more than generative AI. It's, there's lots of applications of computer vision. There's lots of applications of OCR that can really delight and simplify the customer experience.
Got a question here from Tamara. She asks, do you think that the landscape of design as pure practitioners will change and that more designers and researchers will need to adapt and become multidisciplinary practitioners, including things like having to learn coding, computer science, etc., and have to branch out in that way due to the future potential integration of AI?
That's a great question. And I think personally, I feel as a practitioner, it can go both ways, right? You can be multidisciplinary where you are doing a little bit of everything. But I think the more and more the core would lie in how can you really do one job extremely well? Because there are so many tools right now which can really augment whatever you want to do. And, as a person who knows zero code, I can literally code today in the simplest coding language, which is English today, and, write whatever I need to do. So I don't really need to skill up in all of that. AI is already doing the job for me. I think it's about what is that one area that I want to be hyper specialized on, use the right AI tools to augment my specialization and then offer that to the market. And I think that would be true for any profession going forward. We will have generalists overall, but we will have hyper specialists, which will be more and more. And then going back to pure design, I think just like today, while we've got, factories which churn out clothing by millions per second, you still do pay a high price for that beautiful hand-woven piece of cloth. So there would always be that bit of niche market for pure design, but obviously that will be a niche market because at the end of the day, when it comes to, getting stuff out, there is volumes. People need quick production, and design is also going to go that way. That's my assumption and my prediction in a way.
Right. Mark, jump in if you wanted to there.
I think just in our world of consulting, we talk about T-shaped consultants. Be very good at what you do, and sometimes those tools help you be really good at what you do. But I guess the breadth of understanding across what it's capable of, and just getting familiar with AI. It's largely inputs and outputs, right? In different kind of applications, and just knowing that as a designer, sometimes you're designing the UI, like as I've described before. Sometimes it's the content, it's the text that's been generated, the tone of voice around that. It's so broad in terms of where design plays a part in the world of AI. When we talk about content generation, so. I've gotten away with in my role without being technical at all. I don't dev. I'm a really poor coder, but I like I said, I play with AI all the time, and I'm curious about what's behind it. And knowing that, gives me inspiration to suggest ideas of how to improve things as well. I think that's the value that the designers can bring to this new world. Essentially, again, I see it as a massive opportunity and an important part that designers play. I would never form a team without a designer early on and throughout the journey.
It's a powerful answer there from you, Mark. Fantastic. Another one, and we probably just have time for one or two more, but this one's from Ara. Sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. But what, I guess, from the dealings that the two of you have had, what have been the general reactions of senior or organizational management to the adoption of AI, specifically around handling and processing potentially sensitive data and information?
Shabani, do you want me to start?
Yeah.
I guess in the world of generative AI, early on, there was a lot of apprehension that we saw. People were using ChatGPT, uploading as part of prompting some sensitive information and not realizing, how it was being used. And that's from code snippets to all those type of things. So initially the reaction was, okay, we're going to ban you from doing it, to realizing that it's actually a useful tool and people are going to use it anyway. So why don't we put some guidelines of use around this as well? And, when it comes to sensitive data and information these days, when you're using some of these LLMs or these services, whether it's through ChatGPT or some of these other cloud providers, your data is actually protected. The model or the fine-tuned model that you build is actually protected. So as long as you've got the right service levels, as long as you design it in the right way, it's actually it's just like any other software product that you're building. I think, the industry has come a long way in addressing some of those concerns over the last 12 months.
Yep. I would second that. I think the appetite has definitely changed from, completely a no in the organization to yes, but with the guardrails on. So, for instance, one of the organizations just uses probably one platform, which provides an ecosystem of AI tools, whether it's in terms of chat interface or whether it's in terms of completing their PowerPoint presentations, or it is putting together an Excel document. So I think the appetite has definitely improved, and there is a lot more around. Okay, yes, you can use ChatGPT as well, but do not put any organizational data on it. You're not allowed to put any sensitive data around it. So as Mark said, the guardrails are there, and any smart organization is making sure that they put in the guardrails as early as possible.
Amazing. Well, I think we might wrap up the Q&A there, but I understand we have a lot of questions both on the discussion today, and we had a lot of sign-up questions that were put through as well. So we're really encouraged by everyone's involvement. Any remaining questions that we do have, we'll see if we can tackle them offline with some written responses. But we'll also, as I said earlier, we'll be looking to facilitate some additional webinars or conversations around this topic as well moving forward. So we'll have some nice angles and approaches that we can take based on some of the questions we've had as part of today's session. A quick note as well that our ticket winner for the most upvotes, I believe, is Tamara. So Tamara will be in touch with you. And if you can't make the conference, we may even be able to look at bonus credits using our Askable services as an alternative. But thank you everyone for jumping in with your questions, and a huge thank you to Mark and Shabani, obviously, for jumping on and providing their wisdom and insight on this topic. So thank you to the two of you.
Thank you so much, Nate. And just a quick one, congratulations, Tamara, by the way. But for those who could not win a ticket, of course, I do have a discount code for Design Outlook Conference. So feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn directly, and I'm happy to give you that code. It would be good to see you all and say hello to during the conference.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thanks everyone for joining on your lunch break, and enjoy the rest of your day. Cheers.
Yeah.